I can find the record, it'll be really awesome, but I'm currently looking for it and it moved, right?
It's under more.
Why would it not be? More is more, right?
Welcome to the space where ambition meets alignment and success stops costing you your sanity. I'm Janessa Finley Ford. I'm a former perfectionist, a recovering people pleaser, and one of your guides in ditching the burnout without dimming your brilliance. I blend spiritual laws with neuroscience and soul so you can rise, recalibrate, and remember who in the hell you are in this life. And I don't do it alone. So let's meet the other voice behind the mission.
And I'm SJ. I'm a certified crystal healer, and I am a driven leader who leads with conviction and strength, setting an unapologetic standard of excellence. I build high trust communities where candor and accountability forge dependable leaders. Marry all of this woo in together, where we blend the science, spirit, and strategy to rewire energetic patterns for peace, potency, and purpose.
So, where we're headed this evening, let's tell the truth about what high level leadership actually feels like rather than what it looks like on paper. So, there you are, you walk into a meeting, you're already running 3 steps ahead of everyone else. You're tracking dynamics, anticipating the pushback, calculating timing, you're deciding what needs to be said and how it exactly needs to land. And by the time this conversation is over, you've handled it clean and productive and effective. But then it also feels like you just ran a marathon and no one else even noticed. So, why do you end up replaying the conversation over and over again on the drive home, perfecting what you said, tweaking it, questioning what you missed, and actually just carrying the weight of what still needs to be managed? And I feel like that's the part that doesn't get talked about because from the outside, you are leading while internally something else is happening. You're not just making the decisions, you're bracing, you're compensating, you're overfunctioning in ways that feel responsible, but are actually reactive. And this is the unseen layer of leadership. It's not your title or your strategy or your performance. What's driving you before you speak? That subtle urgency in your body that says, I need to stay on top of this. Or that tightness that makes you step in before something goes off track. Or maybe for you, it's the mental load of holding everything together so nothing falls apart. But there's a distinction that needs to really be focused on. And that's what we're going to do here this evening. And it's that it doesn't mean you're leading from cause. It means you've gotten very skilled at managing effects. Because when you truly are at cause, you're not leading from any pressure. You're not leading from anticipation, and you are not leading from the need to hold everything together. So if that's how you've been feeling, lean in. We're going to get into it. We want instead to guide you into a place where you can lead from really clean energy, clear decisions, clean ownership of what's yours and what is not, full presence when you're in the room instead of running 10 moves ahead, trying to stay in front of any possible thing that could come up along the way. And that shows up in ways that you can actually see. You take your breaks without guilt, you actually take your breaks, and your thinking gets sharper. When you stop overworking, your standards rise. You address what needs to be addressed directly instead of carrying it mentally for days. You lead in a way that feels lighter, not heavier. So today we're getting into the very real distinction of this. Are you at cause in your leadership, or are you caught in a pattern that just looks like high performance? Because the leaders who are rising right now are not the ones doing more. They're the ones who have stopped leading from this invisible pressure and have started leading from something far more powerful. So let's open our eyes. As always, we start our show with a funny story. It was very eye-opening. It just happened just right before actually getting ready for the show. And I was getting my food, my lunch ready for tomorrow for work. And I had made some delicious boiled eggs for salads or for my breakfast. And I had peeled one of those things. And you know, when you peel the eggs, and if any of you are trying to, I didn't use leftover Easter eggs. If any of you are trying to clean up your Easter eggs, I don't know if any of you use safe dyes, so then you eat the eggs later. Might have done that growing up as a kid. But anyway, these are really farm fresh eggs, no dye included. And I was so pleased because, of course, the little perfectionist in me had actually peeled the egg well. So not all of the egg white got stuck to the shell. But anyway, I was taking that shell to the trash, walking across the kitchen, and threw it away, turned around, and my husband gave me the grossest faced look I have ever seen in my life. And he was like, "Did you just fart? That's disgusting." And I'm like, "No, I just made eggs." So I hope that gives you all a giggle. At cause or effect, there, I certainly was at the cause of making some rotten egg smell, but not quite in the way that I was accused of. So, really, what we're getting into this month is the law of cause and effect. So, SJ, let's get into it. Introduce us to the topic and let's dive in.
I love this universal law. Last year we came at it a little bit differently and more from a specific accountability stance is where we really started looking at this. The universal law of cause and effect, though, means that there is a cause to every effect. There's a root cause that created the specific effect. And when you think about that, how does that feel when you lean into that concept of you are the cause of every effect that you experience, whether it be within your own personal dynamics or at work? One thing that I really took note of these last couple of weeks as I've been looking at this universal law of cause and effect is I can really see the leaders that show up either at cause or the ones that show up only in effect. And the vast majority of the individuals that I saw were very, very skilled at managing the effect. They were very much in that, how do I clean up this effect that happened? But then when asked to identify what was the cause, that was more difficult versus a couple of the other individuals that I would say there are a couple of people where I work in my other job that people probably look at them and are like, why does it always work out for them? Why is it so easy? Are they even trying? Like, how does this even, doesn't even make sense? Well, those individuals were living at cause. They don't have the victim mentality of the world happens to them because they happen to the world. And you see them show up in cause in every interaction that they have versus trying to manage the effect. What I didn't see those leaders doing were trying to protect or remove boundaries so that other people felt more comfortable in the effect. The at cause leadership individuals were always creating direction in every day, even daily stand-ups. They were creating direction. They always hold the standards. They don't waver from what their standard is. They also make decisions very quickly and they own their specific lane. I kind of laughed a little when I was looking at this. I'm like, they kind of feel like only children who don't necessarily like share well. They're like, this is mine, this is mine. And I'm going to make sure that I'm paying attention to everything that is specifically in my lane. And they also are not individuals that lean on titles. Like they weren't hanging out of like, well, I am this. So therefore, everybody's just going to do what I say and I make right decisions because of my title. They've never lived in their roles, no matter where they were at in that manner. They live in influence. They build relationships really well. They are continually building structures of trust. And then they're able to influence rather than trying to dominate the back end of that specific affect leadership, essentially. And they also don't absorb what isn't theirs to own. So they don't live in that over responsibility of saying, oh, if I had only done XYZ, this would be mine to own. They don't live in that either. They have ample responsibility and they own what they're responsible for, but they're not taking on more for others. Like they really expect and hold the standard that everybody is going to be accountable and responsible for their role within it. And they don't seem to spend a lot of time in the minimizing area of trying to make things more digestible and palatable. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not focused on the emotions or how things feel. Of course, they are. And those items they're focused on during daily interactions, how they interact with their teams, how they interact with other teams. All of that is handled though up front. Like that at cause leadership is very proactive versus the opposite of the effect leadership is reactive to the problems. When I was looking at the people who were living more in the leadership realm of effect, they were very interested in managing everyone's emotions. They were not necessarily always anticipating the problems before they were spoken, but they're really conscientious of how could this be at fault? How could I be kind of at fault for these things happening? The over responsibility. They were also over adjusting to minimize or keep things smoother, and they were carrying outcomes as well that were not actually theirs to own. So, why do we do this though? Well, because the latter, living at effect, we're often rewarded for that in the workplace. We're often rewarded for cleaning up the messes and really taking a look at items like having high awareness, emotional intelligence, strong leadership. All of that is important, right? You have to have both. And even the at cause leaders are focused on all of those things. They too have really high awareness, emotional intelligence, and strong leadership skills, but they focus all of that energy up front rather than on the back end of the problem. And when we live just on that back end of trying to manage the effect, all of those things feel more like pressure, overthinking, exhaustion, and never being able to fully turn off. So burnout is going to come into play if we're only living at cause and or at effect. You can't be completely in one or the other. There has to be balance between the at cause versus the at effect. You have to have both in order to really be that balanced leader.
Absolutely. I think the balance is really where the art of our our leadership and also being human, whether it's leadership in work or leadership in your family, it can be so challenging of finding what is the thing I am to be at cause with that doesn't leave me taking on other people's responsibilities? And where am I being accepting of where I'm being at effect without being disempowered? Now, in the workplace, I think the true mastery of this shows up in an area I personally had to grow into. One example is taking ownership over my decisions. So there's decisions that are going to be made by upper level super leadership. It's going to trickle down, and those you're going to be effective. You're going to have to find a way to adjust and lead the people that you lead to have everyone behind the mission. That's healthy and balanced. But if you're not taking any ownership of your own decisions and kind of pawning off the decisions you are making to upper management, like you never have a decision over anything, then you really are putting yourself in a place of disempowerment and you're fully living from that place of effect. I was having a conversation very recently with my direct supervisor who was giving some examples of different things that different people within the team was doing and the different approaches they were taking. And it's so interesting to see how everyone will find a different way to navigate a scenario. And it really gives you insight to, oh, well, hey, that's a place where I could lean in. I like that a lot. Or, mm, I don't know if that really leaves someone leading versus going along with their team or their group. Now, when you are taking ownership for your decisions and you're not taking ownership of all of the decisions, right? Because there is that like overcompensation that can sometimes blend into control, a little over control freak. where we want to make all the decisions, we're going to call all the shots, and if we have to rein it in a little bit later, so what? And that can kind of create some whiplash because you might be going one direction, then you pivot, then the next, so on and so forth. So it really is, you can't take and make all of this decisions. You can't not own your own decisions and be in a place of empowerment, but you have to find the sweet spot where, okay, these are the decisions that are really in my lane. And another thing that I had to grow into was, if I don't feel comfortable making a decision because it's really not in my lane, articulating that and not passively not making the decision. So I believe I understand very well that when I am working in a system, I am like one gear, one wheel gear turning, making the whole system move. And what are the prongs on my gear? What's my zone? What's my lane of genius or zone of genius? And within my lane, as SJ had said earlier. And where do those lines blur a little bit that maybe we could collaborate? And where am I completely stepping outside of my lane if I just take charge? But I have learned that what is really building powerful relationships with other people is when I've been delegated a POC of a project and people are asking me all sorts of questions, but I know those questions are for upper level management. Instead of being the person that is just going to make a decision and beg for forgiveness later, I will say, well, this is what our policy is. This is what I know I've spoken with upper management about. I know this is their position. It's not my decision to make, so please follow up with them. And then, of course, there's also been conversations with upper management when I am the POC on those projects of what I'm seeing, being a lower step down in the weeds of that project to help them make that final call. And so, really coming alongside and collaborating in kind of that gray area and giving everybody a voice. So I really feel like that is a really clear example of what it looks like to live in the balance and harmony of being at cause and at effect at the same time, because what we're really asking ourselves to do is to hold those two opposite opposing positions simultaneously. And for our black and white brains, they can often be like, no, it's one or the other. But it's really when you're able to do both and to do it uh, in an art form that it strengthens everything. It makes your workflow easier. It doesn't enable anyone around you. It empowers the other people that you work with. All of the gears turn instead of one gear trying to turn everything and the other rusty gears not really moving in that system. And so this is the concept that we're really calling you forth to come forward and step forward here this evening in finding that balance of where you know what is yours to take effect and be at effect with, where to take the inspired action and to focus your energy, and where you can align yourself in harmony with the effects of other people's ripple around you without rocking the boat and turning that ripple into a wave.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some like real world examples of how this stuff can show up can be helpful with seeing it too, because we definitely have different paradigms. When I was thinking about how this showed up for me, it definitely showed up as over responsibility, and living at like all of this stuff is mine. I should have figured this out. All of the I should haves, right? If you catch yourself I should having all over you or anyone else, there's probably an imbalance, right? Like this is one of the best things Janessa has ever said to me is if we're should having all over, like we should definitely work some energy here because something is off. But if you are really looking at those areas of what could you have done differently to have carried a whole team, or finding yourself saying like, I shouldn't have trusted them to get this done. I don't know why I didn't check. Not only are you taking on over responsibility, but you're also preventing them from having the experience of accountability on the flip side of that as well, and just allowing them to own their part, which means you will likely create a pattern where you keep having to hold all of the responsibility and they never find their own accountability within it, to where you repeat the cycle. The pattern of these problems is going to keep coming up. It can also look something simply like being in a meeting where somebody's just off. They're really quiet, they're disengaged, they're not really participating. And you can tell, so like, what do? You soften your tone, you reframe your point, you over explain to try to get them to like buy into what you're saying. You try to prove that you have good intentions, right? Or even maybe you circle back later just to check in. And then you leave that meeting thinking, what did I do? Like, what happened? Did that land? Should I have said it differently? Is something off with me or the team, or like what's going on? And then you move into that imbalance too, because realistically, like their disengagement wasn't even yours to carry. If they're choosing to not participate or advocate for themselves, that's likely not yours to really own the at cause of that effect. That's whatever their cause that they probably need to identify. Their reaction also isn't yours to manage, and their clarity certainly wasn't yours to have to overcompensate for either. So instead of, really just allowing, living in the state of allowance, which this could have been a funny story of Janessa trying to help me get to a place of allowance and why it's really awesome. We could have for sure used that this week because that was a rough one. Instead of living in a state of allowance, you just want to fix it. You want to smooth it over. You want to adjust it. You want to get them to understand. But that's where you're going to hit that over responsibility again. You're just being over responsible for their emotions or their lack of participation. It can also show up in high performers who over function in different ways too, right? Like you have a really strong team, but somehow you're still the one that has to double check everything. You're the one that has to jump in when something feels off. You identify the gaps and you have to clean up the misalignment before it escalates even higher than what it already did. And you probably tell yourself, well, I mean, if you're a 7, you probably tell yourself this, probably a 3 too, like, I'm just smarter, or I just have higher standards, could be another verbiage, or I'm just more dedicated to the mission. Like, there's so many different things that we probably each tell ourselves for why this happens, which is really just an excuse. But also, you don't trust them to hold the standard without you. You don't trust yourself to just let it play out. Like, you're not in that state of allowance of, but what happens if I don't step in early? Like, does the sky fall? And if it does, how do the other team members respond? And also, we rob them of that ability to grow as well if we're always stepping in. And it's a little bit counterintuitive when we get to the end and we're always angry of, why am I always the one that is having to figure this shit out? Well, because you've created that dynamic of cause and effect, right? You have created a dynamic of dependency, hesitation, lack of ownership, because your team learned, well, she'll figure it out, she'll catch it. So you are living in that managing the effect. So even those high achievers that are like, I set up every day and every meeting to be successful, if you're overcompensating still and holding that burden, then likely you are still creating that over dependency, which is not a balanced cause and effect either. The last one I'll share is the emotional load that nobody sees. This one is not me, but this is going to resonate with lots of people, I'm sure, as I was asking my fellow feelers out here in the world of, is this one real? This one was one of them that made more sense or felt more true to them. There's certain people where you're always the one that they come to. They want you to hold space for them, regulate the room, or absorb tension and stabilize it, help them kind of walk through their emotions or whatever is going on. And this is praise, right? Because you're building relationships, you're building trust, you're creating a safe space for your team members. But also, what could be happening if this becomes a pattern to where you don't have them own those emotions and ensure that they are also navigating work in a professional manner, then you could also be the one that's actually processing the emotional energy for them that isn't yours. You could also be carrying the relational weight that wasn't really yours to resolve the dysfunction between them and another person. Or you could be staying in the dynamic longer than you really needed to. Right. So you're allowing this to be a repeat problem where somebody comes to you to solve their emotional debt rather than leaning into being responsible for it themselves. And then you go home and then you're still holding it. and then it's still bothering you. You're trying to figure out, like, how do I get them to let go of this? Or how do I get them to lean into conflict resolution? Like, how do I do all of these things? Where again, you are carrying both the emotional load, but also the responsibility to figure out, how do I resolve this for the other person, instead of, again, living in that state of allowance where maybe this is theirs to learn. Maybe this is their learning to figure out how to gain capacity in a manner that's going to help them be successful at work too. And this is not my, if we've listened to me in years gone past, of emotions have no place in the workplace. Save that for your pillow at night, right? Like, that's not what I'm saying. This is not about caring less or not putting any value into emotions. That's not at all what I'm saying within this. I'm not saying that you should be detached or become cold. I'm just saying we have to allow people to really own their lane and their responsibility for their own emotional responses, and also for increasing their capacity to be able to navigate not just a workspace, but any space where there is going to be conflict, right? We are all different humans. We are going to process information differently. We are going to always have to build capacity in one way or another. So when we're looking at this, I think some couple of ways when we're trying to decide if this is a place that we want to jump in is really just taking a look and saying, not what can I fix? Like, don't ask, do I know the answer? Can I fix this? None of those questions, but really asking, is this even mine? Is this even mine to look at, to resolve, or whatever? And then also discontinue all of those over adjustments. Just allow people to be where they are, and maybe even guide them to take a moment or 24 hours, a sleep cycle, and see if they feel the same way. But creating that space so that they have to resolve their own internal conflict before they can really come back into that space. And then also holding a standard rather than carrying it, which there's a big difference between holding a standard versus carrying it. Carrying a standard is, I'll make sure everyone meets it. You're going to dictate over, like, everyone must make sure that they meet this standard, versus holding a standard is simply, this is the expectation. And they can meet it or they cannot meet it, but this is the expectation, and the expectation doesn't change. It doesn't waver. It's not something different based off of how much water I've drank today or how much sleep I got the night before. It's just simply a standard. So you also remove the emotional charge out of it when it is just simply a standard. And it is always best if we can set standards when there isn't a trigger, right? There isn't the sky that has fallen. So if we can have standards and metrics set before we have to resolve a problem, people are going to receive that far better than, we have new standards due to XYZ happening, which sometimes can feel a little bit attacking too. And then also just letting people own their response. If someone's disengaged, reactive, or unclear, let that be visible. Let them own it. Because when we step in too early, we remove their opportunity to grow and step up. It's not our job to manage immature behavior at work all of the time. Now, you can't let it trickle out to the rest of your team members, but I also don't think that there is a benefit in covering that immaturity for them. Sometimes it has to be seen so that accountability and all of those items can come to play as well.
That brings up for me this nuance about motivating people. So I really hear you talking about, allowing people to be accountable for themselves. And what does that look like in leadership with motivating people? So if someone on your team or someone that you work with, like they don't have the desire to achieve and succeed at the same level you do, what does that look like to be at cause and effect in that balanced space? And I think this is another challenge. I don't like the word challenge, which is why I paused for so long. I was looking for another word, but it's another nuance that leaders face every day, whether this is like in your family with your kids, if you have a different level, like definition of success and achievement than what your kids do, you can really get into a power struggle about what is the bar, what is the standard that's, you're holding, and are they even willing to meet you there? And so I feel as though in this an area that I coach so many people to find that happy medium with is really discussing and talking about what is the goals that person has. Like there's the bigger mission and the bigger goal of for us, for the agencies specifically, but what is the individual's goal? Because when you really speak to the individual's goal, you can usually move them along the spectrum to be supporting the agency's mission if you enter at the point of their commitment. And that took me a little while to master in the workplace. So I'm like, if we're all just achieving and succeeding, we're going to support the mission. But that's not true because every person has their own personal definition of what succeeding is. And that doesn't always meet the standard that's being held. And so coming alongside someone, which is being at effect to support them in their own personal goals that you can build upon to move them in the direction of that larger mission of the agency or your organization, can actually increase the success, the achievement much quicker than just really, I'm only going to focus on the agency, the company, the corporation's mission. That's it, that's it, that's it. You can oftentimes just be beating your head on a wall. But also to be at effect at the same time, I'm sorry, at cause at the same time as being at effect, you're going to want to equip them. You're going to want to give them the skill set, the training, the resources that they need to be successful as well. So on the opposite side of this, there is the approach where people will just skill train, skill train, skill train, and people still aren't rising to the goal because it's not actually a skill-oriented issue that's coming up. And so again, this in-between balance of cause and effect will really allow you to create a culture of success within your workplace, within your team, within your family, with your children, in all of the places, wherever you lead in your life, by giving autonomy and honoring the other person, while also knowing exactly where you can come in with that cause and influence for moving everybody in the same direction, maybe just with a little bit different perspective of what the focus is on. But at the end of the day, as we always say in our community, there's more than one way up the mountain. So it doesn't really matter if people take a different path, it's that you're ending up at the same place, that place of success, that place of meeting the goal at the end of it all. Another thing I wanted to bring up that I feel is seen so often as well around this topic, and I feel like it's a little bit in opposition to what SJ was saying, is when those that you work with or your audience, your colleagues, when they're avoiding responsibility, I'm sorry, they're not avoiding responsibility, they're just words are hard today, friends. Words are so hard. Okay, so when they're not avoiding responsibility, but they are misdirecting their responsibility. And this is my point. I'm trying to make it concise, and maybe sometimes I just need to use more words. But it's that sometimes we can get wrapped up in this cause and effect, very linear perspective, and we might only look one or two levels above us in leadership. If we're in a really big organization, there could be a lot of different levels, and there's a whole lot of moving parts and pieces and influences and factors. And so if we get really, really far-sighted vision where we no, nearsighted vision where we only see up close, then we're going to start attributing the cause of a situation and misdirect this blame, really, is what's happening. We're going to misdirect it where it's really not effective. Like they don't, it's not their call, it's not their decision, they don't have that much power, whatever the situation is. And so instead of coming back and looking at, okay, this is where I am at effect of, recently within the government, there's been a lot of different agencies who have had their head secretaries and the high up positions being replaced. And that has a ripple effect. And instead of really taking into account at that high level, where are we at effect because of those situations, misdirecting the fact that there are these inconveniences and challenges within the workplace to our local leadership, which, for me personally, when I look at it, I'm looking at it from a bigger picture where I feel like the cause is coming from a much higher system, right? Like the big gears in the system and not the little gears that are right around us that are creating things to move differently. And so we do need to constantly be testing and stretching our perspectives of full picture understanding of what is happening around us. And then being able to accurately assess, again, coming back to what I said earlier, and not to beat a dead horse, but where can I settle in and rest in the fact that these things are transpiring? And if I try to tackle the world and make all of these choices, decisions, and actions right now, I'm overextending myself in very ineffective ways because it's not going to get the system to move. So, accurately assessing where do I need to lean back and accept the effect of other things going on around me? And where can I lean in really effectively and, of course, efficiently, because I'm an Enneagram 1, to create cause to adapt to whatever those situations are and to not be misdirecting or blame shifting away from your own control. So, a recent conversation I had with someone, they were saying really this disempowered stance because of X, Y, and Z, and all of these other things that were happening. And at a really local level, they weren't doing this and they weren't doing that. And this isn't happening either. And I had to take pause and I looked at it from that perspective and I'm like, well, that's a different way of looking at it. I can't meet you there and I can appreciate your perspective, but this is what I see. And I was looking at it from a much higher level up. And I think that really did, if nothing else, create a little less angst for the situation. It didn't immediately shift the situation. Like we're still sitting in the middle of the same challenges, if you will. But there's something to be said for the relationships and trust that you build with those directly around you. And if you're collaborating with them to always keep things moving as smoothly as possible versus feeling like they're failing you. And I think that's really what it comes down to was a different belief system that this individual and I had around the system as a whole and the people directly around us and seeing clearly what cause can they have, what power do they have, and what they do not. So when we are misdirecting and misidentifying the cause, it's really going to keep people who can perform in high capacity positions stuck at below their potential outcomes because they're misdirecting their potency and their effectiveness in where they do truly have cause. But I
Mhm.
love how you brought in some of the emotional side because I mean, being a feeler, I should naturally see this.
This is your job, not mine.
I know, right? It wasn't my go-to actually when I was reflecting on what I have experienced, what I coach on a lot. Yeah, it didn't just pop into my purview to explain. So that I always love we are always stronger together. There's always that complementary perspective that we bring.
You brought up a really good point through that as well too when you talked about like what are these individual persons' goals? Like what do they see as success? Where are they trying to go? And I think that is one thing as leaders that we often don't want to accept the answer, right? Like sometimes people are happy exactly where they are and don't want to do anything different. They don't want to go anywhere else. They don't want to learn anything new, which seems like blasphemy to me. What do you mean you don't want to learn a new skill? I mean, um, but I think that is one of the hardest things for us to accept as high achievers and leaders is that for some people, they don't want to do more. They don't have a new achievement goal in store. And there's no way for us to bestow upon them our guidance system of more is more. And you should always be achieving every day. That's not our place. And that's where we live at an imbalance as high achieving leaders as well within this universal law of cause and effect of, well, how do I get them to want more? How do I get them to want more for themselves? Why don't they want more for themselves? Like, I don't understand why they don't want more. And sometimes we just have to accept that if they're meeting expectations, okay, I guess it is what it is. And we'll assign them mundane tasks of same shit day in and day out, but also really leaning into the not everyone is a good fit for the teams that they've been placed on. And sometimes that is the lesson within the universal law of cause and effect is accepting that this is a bad fit. And the effect of that is we have to relinquish the control over letting them get better or allowing them to even stay on the team when they are bringing the rest of the team members down. I think that is a really hard place for most high achieving leaders to sit in is making that type of decision as well of how can I be both in balance of at cause and effect with that type of a decision where the individual is just no longer a good fit. And how do you make those decisions? Are there standards in place that you can make them? Is it a feeling? And have we done our due diligence of documentation as well so that, of course, that person can see and then make a decision, right? Because the documentation is, in my opinion, upfront should not be with the goal of getting rid of. Documentation like PIPs and things like that should truly be to provide opportunity for change, right? In my mind, those should always be opportunity based and not outcome based, of get rid of the human. And I think sometimes that gets flawed within a lot of environments, not just the government, right? Like a lot of places, I think, utilize performance improvement plans in various ways that are not necessarily helpful for providing opportunity. One other topic that I wanted to touch on too is that I think there's an addiction identity to a lot of this as well. Um, I can admit that I am certainly an adrenaline junkie. So being selected as the human to come in and clean up the fucked up thing that's terrible and destructive and not working, I love that. Like, I like the adrenaline rush of coming in, fixing, cleaning something up. Of course, I love figuring it out, right? Like, I love figuring the puzzle out of how do we do this. I also think, though, on the flip side of that, or in paradigm with that, it's an addiction to being needed. Who doesn't want to be needed, right? Like you really want people to reach out to you, to need you. It's that connection part. It's really that, especially I think a lot of us probably didn't have a lot of validation as children. So when you get that validation at work of, I need you, like, I need you to come in, and they use those words too, right? Like, we really need you to come in and fix this, or we really need you to come in and figure this out. And I think this is one of those hidden like addictions to being needed is 100% ego based, right? Like this is the ego that we are feeding. This is not some like, oh, I'm balanced and heart centered and this just feels so good. So it can't be ego. No, this is 100% ego based because it feels like, oh, well, I'm reliable. People trust me with responsibility. I must be such a great leader and I deliver so many great things that they trust me with this. But with that, there is definitely an identity that we have tied to being the one who holds it all together, or the one who figures it out, or the one who cleans it up. Like insert your identity ID that you've now created for yourself. And then when you get tired of it or burnt out, which you will inevitably, sometimes it'll take longer than others, but you will eventually get burnt out of being used because that is often what is also happening with this. Then the resentment sets in, right? Then we start to resent the process. We resent ourselves. We resent our teammates. We resent our team members. We resent our peers. We resent leadership. And we just get a little bitchy about why am I always the one that's asked to do all of this stuff? Well, because you created the identity that you like it. You want more of it. You wanted to be needed. And of course, the pendulum has to swing in the opposite direction for you to realize sometimes that that is what happened. And now it's time to come back to center. And often, when you have these addiction IDs going on within this, it can sound like things like, if I don't step in, it's all going to fall apart. Well, if I don't do it, no one will. It's just easier if I do it. That's my personal favorite. Like, it actually takes me less time if I just do it myself. And then I get really pissy when I continually have to just do it myself. Or we say things like, I can handle more than they can. And sometimes all of those things are true, but they should not be the norm. None of that should be the normal response that happens. The one offs, absolutely. Like stepping in to be helpful of your team members in those different ways, sure. But when that is literally the pattern and the day in and day out, it is likely an imbalance that is coming up too. Because like you've tied your entire identity to being needed. So then you are also going to unconsciously and possibly consciously even create environments where people need you, which is also disempowering those around you.
It's so very true. I could just feel my body lighting up as you talked about that. And there's something to be said for this personal development work and the ripple effect into work, because while you might not always be triggered in a negative way, sometimes you're triggered with the yearnings that you want that make you feel so fulfilled instead of being fulfilled simply because you're you and you're God's masterpiece. But as my body lights up, it's the perfect segue into probably the final point that I want to land here in this episode about the body. Because our body holds these patterns before our minds can ever explain them. And we will miss a lot of cues. You know, there'll be tightness or fatigue. You might experience shutdown or urgency, like not being able to make space to make decisions. Maybe you're just completely in overdrive and that hustle. I worked with a mentor one time, and in the moment, I was so disgusted when they're like, do you need to go to the bathroom? Maybe you should get some water. And I'm like, no, I have water right here, but I could kind of go to the bathroom. And they're like, yeah, take a break and do that. And of course, I'm efficient. Enneagram 1, I'm like, this is the stupidest waste of this call. Okay, fine, I'm gonna go because like they were really persistent. You should do this. So pause the call, I go to the bathroom, I come back, and the thing that we were talking about, like it just dropped in, like immediately. And they're like, yeah, that's why I really wanted, like when your body has its needs met, it's going to function the way it should. It's going to reveal the answers. It's going to support you in what your goals are. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I literally had to learn that lesson this way because I really will be the person that will hold my bladder until I can't possibly hold it any longer. And I know you're listening out there too, and you're like, yep, guilty. Like you might be that person that doesn't hold space for your breaks. Maybe you just work all day on to the next task, and then there's a meeting, and then there's another meeting, and then there's an unexpected call, and one thing bleeds into another. And instead of just nope, I'm not responding to these messages. I'm not checking my email. I am not picking up the phone for 15 minutes. I'm taking my 15-minute break. When you do that, it really does support you in being more effective. This is a way and a place where you can be at cause of so many other things that ripple effect throughout your day because you're showing up in your optimum physical state and you are giving your body what it needs to perform for you. Your body, your mind, your brain, all of it. And I feel like that is also one of the easiest things in the workplace. That is the hardest thing to do for leaders. Because when you're a leader, there are always people reaching out to you for an answer rather than looking it up. There's always people wanting to have a thinking partner because you're the outside the box thinker, or you always have a solution to stuff. Like there's always going to be something else. I literally realized today I actually need to start a list of things that I want to research and expand my skill set on when I get the time, right? When I get the time, because I realize that when I have some space, I don't remember what those things are. But it's really the art of building in the space, because if I don't protect and hold that time for my own development in my skills, in my job, in my position, in the knowledge, and I just wait for a slow day, there are few and far between days that are slow to have a opportunity. And so I truly have to lean into being at cause for showing up physically in my prime, getting my lunch, getting my breaks, and also to develop my mind, to develop my skills. And this is so common. I know you're out there listening and you're like, yeah, this is so true. So figure out a way, put it in your planner, put it in your calendar, have those reminders go off. Like, I'm going to go walk one lap, go to the bathroom, and get a drink of water, and then sit back down. You absolutely need that time during the day. And I know this sounds like self-care, not even 101 if there's a lower level of that, but it really goes by the wayside. So many days, things are just so hectic and chaotic. It it just is the last thought. It's an afterthought. SJ, do you have anything else that you wanted to leave our listeners with before we move into wrapping up for the show?
I'll just leave them with I pose the reflection to you of how did you gain or create more capacity for yourself? Because when I leaned into that, it was for me opportunity, opportunity for uncomfortable situations where nobody rushed in to save me. And I got to decide how to navigate that. And they didn't minimize the uncomfortable. And if we don't create that opportunity for our team members and we always rush in to just fix and save, then we can't hold the expectation that the effect of that will be more capacity, because it won't be. It's going to be the exact opposite of that. So really
Mm.
leaning into looking at how do we create opportunity for more capacity to be gained, not just within ourselves, but within the team units that we are at play with as well. And
Mhm.
one of the best ways that I think we do that is by questioning the norm. So not just saying yes to, well, this is how we've always done it, so let's keep doing that. Always asking and being inquisitive with the why am I doing it this way? Why are we doing it this way? And then allowing the space, though, for the other individuals and departments to think and to feel into, well, why are we doing it? So that it's then a collaborative effort of we shouldn't just do the same thing over and over again, especially if it's not yielding the effect that we would like for it to yield. So I'll leave us with that pondering.
It's so good. It's so true. My mind, I think there's a whole opportunity for Enneagram conversation, but we'll save that for the next show. When you mentioned like which question to ask, my Enneagram one brain pops into a little bit different of
Mhm.
how can we improve? How can we do this
Yep.
better? Um, but anyway, as we move to the top of the hour, we really do have to wrap this up. So if you felt yourself in this conversation, it's not because you're doing leadership wrong at all. You likely feel yourself in this conversation because you've been carrying leadership in a way where it just wasn't meant to be carried alone. Whether you're dealing with the overthinking or the constant anticipation or the pressure to stay ahead, stay sharp, stay responsible for absolutely everything in the room or on your team. And you find that it really does work until it doesn't, because at some point, high performance without really clean causation turns into quiet exhaustion, and that quiet exhaustion will snowball into complete burnout. And the shift that we're really pointing out today is that not everything is yours to carry, of course, and not everything is yours to fix. Everything is yours to decide. Because real leadership is not just about stepping into cause, like we talked about earlier in the show. It's about knowing with precision where you are at cause and where you are cleanly at effect, not a disempowered effect, but cleanly balanced effect. This is where you lead and where you allow. It's where you hold standards like SJ talked about, and where you stop over functioning in systems that were never that part of it yours to control. That level of clarity doesn't just change how you work, it changes how you feel in your work. You'll show up lighter and cleaner, more decisive, less entangled. And that's exactly the work that we do inside Stronger Together. This is not a space where you're handed more strategies to manage your time or optimize your performance. This is where you learn how to stop leading from that invisible pressure that builds within you. Inside the room of Stronger Together, you'll start to see where you've been over responsible and thought you were just being accountable. And you're also going to see how to release it without dropping your standards. You're going to start to see where you've been living at the effect of others and how to shift back into real clean authority. You're going to see how to bring your A game without burning through your energy, your breaks, or your body to do it, and how to lead in a way that's aligned with you, not just modeled after what you've seen work for someone else, because that's the surest way to have it not work for you. And overall, the goal is not to do less, it's just to stop doing what was never yours so that you can show up fully for what is actually yours to do and do it really cleanly. So, if you're ready to lead with that level of clarity, to feel the difference between pressure and precision, and you just stop carrying leadership because you finally, truly, fully embody it, we would love to welcome you into Stronger Together. Because powerful women, you don't need more pressure. You need the right room to be able to rise in. And you can find that room at www.strongertogetherinstitute.com. We'll be back here in 2